What's up, everyone? Thanks so much for joining the Sanjana Fitness Hatha Yoga YouTube channel this morning. My name is Sam, and today's flow will be hips and hamstring focused with the theme of turning inward. So you might have a mantra like, with every breath, I soften, surrender, and reconnect with my inner self. You probably won't need any blocks or props today, but please feel free to bring a pillow for under your hips. And we will start in the middle of our mat in a comfortable cross-legged seat when you're ready. Okay, so we're gonna settle in a comfortable cross-legged seat. Feel free to bring a pillow for under your hips if you want that. And if this is very uncomfortable, we'll be here for a little while. So just put your legs straight out in front of you. You could be facing the long way on your mat if you want to. And you can just bring the palms to next to the hips or just rest them on your lap. This is like a modified staff pose. So whatever version you're in, get comfortable. We're gonna take this time in our opening meditation just to drop in, to notice what you feel and where, and to start to reconnect with the body. Physically, this flow is designed to help nurture the hips and hamstrings, but the theme of today's practice is turning inward. So if you need a mantra for that, something to repeat to yourself to bring back your focus during the practice, it might be something like, with stillness, I find clarity or peace. Or with every breath, I soften, surrender, and reconnect with my inner self. So that's going to be the goal today. There will be a few long holds and opportunities for you to turn inward, and I will try to be quiet during those moments. As you're settling in, just start to notice the connections of your body to the earth, or your hips and ankles to the mat. Noticing how you feel in the physical body, the intellectual body, the emotional body, and the spiritual body. Remember, we're just taking inventory of that without judgment. So however you feel, just observe that. Remember that this practice is your own, so all of my verbal cues are just suggestions. Feel free to move in any way that your body is asking you for today. Be curious in your body and make this practice for you. Mostly we're going to take this time in our opening and closing meditations and throughout the practice just to practice turning inward, quieting the mind, taking control of the focus. So you can repeat your mantras if you need an aid for that. Reconnect the breath when your mind starts to wander. So just listening to the sound of the breath, noticing the fullness of your inhales. Maybe letting go of something you can't control with every exhale. Remember that you are not your body or your mind, so it's your job to nurture both and take care of them. You can start to imagine this little bubble of peace and self-care that you're starting to create for yourself here on the mat. As we're settling in, just check in with your spinal alignment and the quality of your breath. I like to take a little mudra with my hands on my knees, but you can also place your hands on the body if it helps you feel more connected or centered or grounded. Letting go of the ego here, letting go of anything that's distracting you, memories from the past or planning for the future. Taking this first meditation just to practice being here now and turning inward, creating that safe space for yourself. Taking inventory, maybe receiving some messages from the universe, otherwise just quieting the mind. Notice whether you have control over your focus or whether you need to reconnect with the breath. You can picture your thoughts as leaves floating on a river or clouds passing through the sky. And you can observe those thoughts with the same non-attachment that you would the clouds or the leaves. So just noticing and letting go of that. Really trying to cultivate stillness in the mind. Maybe repeating your mantra or coming back to the breath. Take a few more cycles of breath. Just turning inward and taking that first practice of stillness. You can gently open the eyes if your eyes are closed. Bring your awareness back to center. Check in with your posture. And if you do not have legs extended, we're going to do that. So I'm going to turn on my mat, but you can stay where you are or center yourself on your mat, whatever works. And with our legs out long in front of us, we're going to come into a seated forward fold. So if you're very tight in the hamstrings, this might not be possible. If that's the case, we'll just bend into the knees and bring the soles of the feet to the mat before sending the palms up and overhead and hinging at the hips. And you'll just wrap your arms behind your knees to start stretching through that posterior chain. If seated forward fold is accessible for you, send the legs out long, full extension at the knees, checking in with the hips and the spinal alignment. We'll send the palms up and overhead, facing one another, reaching the fingertips toward the ceiling, reaching a little bit higher, getting really long through the spine, taking up space. And then when you're ready, we can hinge at the hips and fold forward. Imagine the hands going beyond the feet, but wherever they land is cool. Don't pull yourself into this shape with your elbows or your hands. We're not forcing anything here. If the palms don't reach the feet, you can just open them up on either side of the shins. Wherever you are, let's relax the head, the neck, the shoulders, and take this opportunity to turn inward.
So I would encourage you just to take these opportunities to really quiet the mind and notice what you get out of turning inward and finding stillness in the mind. So allow yourself to get there. Let go of whatever's distracting you. Notice if you have become distracted. If so, come back to the breath. Letting your thoughts pass like clouds in the sky. You're just kind of sinking in here, being supported by the earth, allowing yourself just to be. You might also take this opportunity just to put your mind's eye where you feel bodily sensations. And just to articulate to yourself what you feel and where without attachment, without getting overwhelmed. Stay here as long as you like. Take your time there, especially if you're able to find stillness in the mind. When you transition out of this pose, do so with the same intention that you used to come into the pose. So what does that mean? Slow down a lot, be mindful, plant the sits bones, plant the tailbone. Slowly articulate up through the spine and enjoy that journey. Notice what you feel. Be present. Letting go of everything else but your practice. Come all the way up to sitting, roll the shoulders back, tuck the chin, check in with your posture. Take a nice deep breath, and then we'll come forward onto all fours for a cat-cow variation. So you can get there however you get there. I'm going to cross my ankles and roll forward onto my palms, bringing the knees under the hips and palms under the shoulders. You can keep your toes curled under if you want to. And we'll move through a little cat-cow, syncing up with the breath. So on your inhale, drop the ribs, the low belly, lift the gaze, pull the shoulders back. And on your exhale, arching through the upper back, pressing into the lower palms. Low ribs come in to meet the back body. Move at your own pace with your natural breathing rhythm. This practice is yours, not mine. So make it your own. And of course, we'll take any variation within cat-cow that feels right. So I'm just going to draw circles with the ribs, as we tend to do, bending into the elbows and just exploring the full range of motion of the spine, which can actually articulate in some really cool ways. So be curious in the body. Bring some heat to that myofascia, lubricate the joints. And just follow the sensations of the body, so do what feels good. your time. And when you feel great about it, we'll come into an extended child's pose. If that's way too intense on the hips, you can come into a traditional child's pose just by bringing the knees and shins together, uncurling the toes, sending the hips back, and bringing the forehead to the mat. Palms open toward the ceiling or maybe touching the feet. But if it is accessible and you want to continue with our theme of hips and hamstrings, we'll come into an extended child's pose by opening the knees wide, keeping the toes touching, sending the hips back toward the heels and walking the hands forward. And just resting in these passive versions of these poses is really great for your flexibility, mobility. But these long holds are also great for meditation, for turning inward, for quieting the mind. Notice if your thoughts start to wander. Just give yourself permission to come back. Come back to stillness, come back to the breath. You might rock the forehead gently left to right, or find stillness in the physical body as well. Imagining this bubble that you cultivated in your opening meditation. This beautiful, safe space that you've created for yourself. Let go of the ego and any attachments or distractions you have in this space. Allow yourself just to be. When you're ready, and only when you're ready, transition into the next pose, or stay here as long as you'd like. It's your practice, truly. To transition, we'll just press into the fingertips, gently lift the forehead, and walk the hands up toward the body. And we're going to come into another wide-legged pose here. So I'm going to turn to face you. You can stay where you are. I would just make sure that your knees are in contact with the mat and possibly your ankles if it's uncomfortable. So coming onto all fours, I'm going to widen the knees as wide as is comfortable, really. Mine's a little bit wider than my torso. And I'm going to point the toes away from one another. Toes are pointed in opposite directions. We'll come down to the forearms, and you can just rest here. You can find stillness here, or you can rock gently forward and backward, just not bouncing, but gently stretching through the hips. So if that movement is really intense, just go ahead and find stillness. And if this pose in and of itself is too intense, move the knees a little closer together. Taking a second here just to start stretching through the hips. And I especially like to practice turning inward in these poses that are more challenging. So bring your focus to that. Quiet the mind, come back to the breath. Notice if you're distracted, and just let that go. You can stay here as long as you like. We're going to move into downward dog next. So if this pose is just not it for you, feel free to wait for us there. Downward dog is also great for the hamstrings and for turning inward. So when you're ready to come out of this pose, just bring the fingertips or the palms to the mat. Extend through the elbows, walk the knees in toward one another. And from here, we'll move into downward dog in a little sequence. So palms a little bit wider than the shoulders, rotate the fingertips away from one another. We'll curl the toes under here and extend fully through the knees, bringing the hips up toward the ceiling or the sky, and bringing the heels down somewhere toward the floor. It's okay if they're not touching. So take a second there in your first downward dog of the day. A good way to stretch through those hamstrings is just to bend into each knee, alternating. And just notice those sensations. Notice what you feel and where. Take your time there or find stillness, whatever feels right. And when you're ready, we're going to plant that left foot somewhere near the midline of the mat. We'll slide the right foot down toward the bottom of the mat and up toward the ceiling, really reaching, really lifting. Notice what you feel and where. And then let's bend into that right knee, pull that right hip open toward the ceiling. Lift the gaze to between the palms, and we'll bring that right foot all the way up and through to be framed by the hands. Pivot on the back foot, so you're pressing into the outside edge of that left foot, and we're going to come into warrior two. So lift the gaze, hinge at the hips, lead with the fingertips, opening them up parallel to the ground. Sink down nice and deep into that right knee. Feel good about it. Build strength, pulling that right knee open. Nice, strong foundation. Take your time here, building strength. When you're ready, we'll cycle the hands back down to frame that right foot, and then we'll vinyasa. So pivot on that back foot, send the right foot back for plank. Slowly lower to the belly for cobra or upward facing dog, whatever's in your practice. And then we'll meet back in downward dog. Notice if anything's different from this downward dog and the first. If not, that's okay. What we do to one side, we'll do on the other side. So setting up with hands rotated outward, let's plant that right foot, slide the left foot down the mat and up toward the ceiling, really reaching. Bend into that left knee, pull that left knee, left hip up toward the ceiling. Lift the gaze to between the palms, and we'll bring that left foot all the way up and through. Pivot on the back foot. Coming onto that outside edge of the right foot, we'll hinge at the hips. Come up into warrior two on the second side. Sinking down into that left knee, getting low. The lower you go, the more you're building strength there. So take your time, enjoy that experience. Say thank you. And cycle the hands all the way back down to frame that left foot. Once again, we'll vinyasa, so send that left foot back. Slowly lower to the belly or upward facing dog. Pressing up for cobra. And sending the hips up, high and back. Curl the toes under, press up for plank, find your downward dog. Take your time here, notice if anything is different in this downward dog from the first two. And from here, we're going to move into a pigeon pose. And we're going to hold there for a while. So we'll take our time getting set up. First, we'll move that left foot to the midline of the mat or somewhere near it. Once again, slide that right foot down the mat and up toward the ceiling. Check in with your range. Notice what you feel. And then we're going to bend into that right knee. This time we're going to bring the right knee all the way up and through, keeping it bent, coming down onto that right hip, and maybe walking that left foot backward. So my right knee is bent in between my palms. We'll take a minute here in the upright version of this pose before we fold forward. Feel free to grab a block or a pillow for here in front of your knee if you want that. And then just check in with the degree of flexion in that right knee. So if this is super intense, bring your right heel in as close as you can toward the body. And if you want more intensity, just open up that degree of flexion in the right knee. Either way, we'll get grounded, we'll get centered here. And then we'll gently fold forward over that right knee, maybe coming onto stacked fists or stacked palms, or just bending into the elbows and leaning over that right knee. When you find your space, try to relax into that. You've created another opportunity for yourself just to turn inward. So I encourage you to take that. I encourage you to notice if something's distracting you and let that go. And I would also suggest just being present in the sensations of the body. Make sure you're not tensing or holding anywhere. No tightness in the glutes, anywhere in the lower body, in the face, the neck. Just letting all of that go. Remind your body it's okay to relax. You are in control of this practice. And reconnect with the breath. Notice if you've become distracted or overwhelmed and try to reel that in. We're taking control of the mind to quiet the mind. Let your thoughts pass like clouds in the sky. And come back to the sound of your breath like waves crashing on the beach. Allow yourself to stay in this pose as long as you want. If and when you're ready to come out, you can do so first by lifting the forehead, bringing the palms under the shoulders for support and extending through the elbows. Take another moment in the upright version of this pose before we transition out. And you know, what we do to one side, we will do to the other. So coming onto the fingertips, leaning forward just a bit, I'm going to curl my left toes under to lift my hips, sending my right foot back for plank, slowly lowering to the belly or vinyasa, cobra or upward facing dog. And then we'll come back into downward dog to get set up for the second side. So coming into plank, sending the hips up high toward the ceiling. Checking in once again with that downward dog. Notice if something's different. If not, no big deal. Okay, so second side, we'll bring that right foot to somewhere near the midline of the mat. Bend into the left knee and slide that left foot all the way down the mat and up toward the ceiling, really reaching. We'll bend into that left knee. Lead with that left knee, bring it all the way up and through the palms. Coming down onto that left hip. Maybe walking the right foot further back behind you. So before we fold, always get set up in the seated version of this pose. Making sure that you're anchored through the hips, you're balanced, you're not rolling over to the left. Use your hands to support you there. And on your next exhale, we'll use the hands just to fold forward over that left knee this time. Coming onto stacked fists or stacked palms or a pillow or anything you want to put under your forehead here. You can also bring your forehead all the way down to the mat if that's accessible. Either way, we're finding that degree of flexion in the knee that allows us to relax into this pose. Breathe into that left hip. To let go of anything we don't need right now. Take this time just to turn inward again. Find stillness in the mind. If you struggle with that, repeat your mantra or come back to the sound of the breath. You might notice that one side is very different from the other, and that's totally okay. Just make a note of that. Take inventory, practice non-attachment. We'll stay here for a few more cycles of breath. Take your time to indulge yourself there. Enjoy the safety and care of the bubble you've created for yourself. Take as much time as you'd like on this side. When you're ready to come out, we'll do so mindfully with intention. And we'll start by pressing the palms or the fingertips into the mat, under the shoulders, coming up to full extension at the elbows and finding the seated version of this pose once again. So take your time here. When you're ready to come out, we'll press into the palms, curl the right toes under to lift the hips. I'm going to send my left foot back for plank. And from here, we'll walk up to downward dog. And then we'll just continue walking the hands up toward the body to come into a standing forward fold. So if your hamstrings are very tight, you might need something to put your hands on here, like a yoga block or some books. You can also just rest the hands on the shins if it feels good, or just let the hands hang down toward the earth. Wherever they are. Just let gravity do the work. Whatever version of this you're in, take this time to breathe deeply, all the way down through the hamstrings into the heels. Take this time to root down through the earth and feel supported by your mat. Maybe take this time to practice gratitude for the ability to practice yoga. Or otherwise find stillness in the mind. We'll root down to come out of this pose, so just really planting the heels, pressing down through all 10 toes, sinking our weight into the back of the feet. We're going to slowly curl up to standing, so take your time getting there. Move with intention. Notice what you feel and where as you move. Slow it down as much as you can. Take your time getting up to standing. Roll the shoulders back when you're there. So we're just going to come into a runner's stretch from here. So I'm going to take one big step forward. You can too. I would make it as wide a step as possible. Maybe inch the right toes a little further away from the body. And we're going to bend into that left knee, lower it to the mat. So from here you might walk that right foot a little further forward or the left foot a little further back. We can lean forward to put our fingertips on the mat somewhere near the heel. So I'm kind of framing my heel here. And then I'm just going to extend through the right knee, roll onto that right heel, right toes come up toward the ceiling. And either literally or just imagine pulling that right heel in toward the right hip. So physically we're focused on the right hamstrings here. We can relax through the head, the neck, the shoulders. You can walk the hands a little further if it feels good. Not forcing any shape. Just checking in with the hamstrings and giving you another opportunity to relax your mind. Close your eyes. Take your time here, spend as much time as you like. When you're ready to come out, we'll start by bending into that right knee, coming onto the sole of the right foot. We'll send that right foot back. I'm just going to come into all fours from here and bring my left foot forward to switch sides. You can frame that left foot, maybe walk that right knee back a little more. Kind of looking for like a wide stance here. And when you've got that wide stance, set up your fingertips to frame that left foot, and we'll do the same thing, just extending through that left knee, left toes come up toward the ceiling, and imagine pulling that left heel in toward the left hip. Close your eyes if it feels good. Relax through the head, the neck, the shoulders. Reconnect with the breath. Quiet the mind. And when you're ready, slowly bend into that left knee, bringing the sole of the left foot back to the mat. From here, we'll send that left foot back to all fours. And we'll just take a little puppy stretch here. So starting with the palms under the shoulders, knees under the hips. We'll walk the hands forward and wide, rotating the fingers away from each other, bringing the chest and the forehead down to the mat. We won't be here long, so just give yourself this opportunity just to breathe. To allow yourself to let go of anything you don't need. Stay here as long as you like, or bend into the elbows. Bring the palms under the shoulders and fully extend, coming back into that tabletop pose. We're going to finish in a seated meditation, so grab your pillow if you want to. We're going to finish the same way that we started, so I'll meet you there when you're ready. Take your time moving. Move with intention. Find that comfortable cross-legged seat or extend the legs fully in staff pose. Check in with that spinal alignment, reconnect with the breath. Take any mudra that you like or rest the hands on the body if that feels right. I'm just going to open up my palms and let them rest in my lap. So once you've got your good alignment here, reconnect with the breath. Close your eyes if it feels good. And bring the intention from your practice to this closing meditation. You might repeat your mantra now. In stillness, I find clarity and peace. Or with every breath, I soften, surrender, and reconnect with my inner self. Whatever mantra you're using, just allow yourself this time just to turn inward one more time. If you get distracted, take control of that using the tools and the cues I've given you throughout this practice, like coming back to the breath,
and practicing non-attachment with our thoughts. Get distracted, just notice without judgment and correct that. Enjoy the fullness of your inhales. Maybe let go of something you don't need on your next exhale. Remember, we can't fill up anyone else's cup unless our cup is full. So I would encourage you to take more time just to turn inward and to meditate on your own. With that being said, you can stay in this closing meditative posture, whatever pose you're in, for as long as you'd like. I'm going to start closing this practice by bringing my palms together to rest in front of the heart space. So before we close today, I would just encourage you to take these lessons, take these mantras with you throughout your day and throughout your week. I also want to recognize before we close this practice that I am leading this practice from former Monongahela and Osage lands. I would encourage you to find out whose native lands you are practicing from and how to get connected with their ongoing liberation work. We also want to recognize that yoga is an ancient spiritual practice stemming from Indian culture and the subcontinent of India, so we recognize and honor that without appropriation. We also recognize that yoga functions in many different ways for many peoples of the world, including as a community. Thank you so much for being part of my community today. I hope you got something you needed here today, and I hope to see you again soon. Namaste.